Hey, it's Kevin from KD Music. Just continuing on with my videos of Softube Console 1. In this video I thought I'd show how I'm setting up and sort of using the Console 1 in Pro Tools. So just keep in mind that if you use different DAW software, it's going to work slightly differently. So hopefully I can show you some little tips and tricks that I've picked up along the way, give you an idea of what to expect, or whether you like the way it works and the workflow. Now, also keep in mind there's lots of ways to actually use this console. So you may have a totally different workflow and you can use it in an absolutely different way. So I'll sort of show you how I'm doing it, and then we'll go from there. So I'm not going to show you the process, but the first thing you're going to want to do when you get your Console 1, obviously pull it out of the box. In the box you'll have a quick start piece of paper, and on that will be your license registration. So you go to the Softube website, register the license on Softube. They then send to your iLok account, which you must already have, the license onto your iLok account. Now once they've completed that, you can download it to either a physical iLok if you've got one, or if you don't have one, you can actually, it's one of the newer licenses, so you can actually install it onto your computer itself, which might be handy if you don't have an actual iLok, but you will need an iLok account, so you'll at least need to set that up. Once you've done that on your computer, this is a Mac, you'll see a little thing running up here. Once you've plugged your Console 1 in, that'll be black, I guess you'll call it. It's sort of grey and doesn't say that it's connected, obviously, when it's not plugged in. So, and it just runs off a USB cable. There's no power. It's all self-powered from the USB port, which is really handy. The build quality of the console itself is really good. It's as solid as a rock. This thing. It's absolutely, yeah. It's not plasticky. It's metal, and it feels very, very solid. So once you've done that, then you're going to open your DAW with your tracks, etc. Now, I'm going to show you from the start, but obviously once you've established your workflow and how you generally set things up, it's probably advisable to set up a template or something like that, unless you like to set this up from scratch every time. So one of the downsides right now with Pro Tools, which hoping to be fixed, but this is an Avid issue, Softube cannot fix this, is that the Console 1 can either support two mechanisms. One is an auto mode or a manual mode. Auto mode is where when you put the plug-in onto the track, it will automatically populate the track number and the name based on what is in the DAW. Now Pro Tools doesn't support that at the moment, and as I said, that's actually up to Avid to fix that. So I'm hoping that Softube are working with Avid, and Avid are going to do that. So with Pro Tools we have to do it the manual way. So, and I'll show you what that means. So just to give you a bit of background with my layout, originally I had my tracks in an opposite way. I had my audio tracks all on the left and my buses on the right. Now I've actually switched that around since I've got the console, and the reason I've done that is because if I have these on the left, I always know on my console that the mix bus is on track 1 and these buses are on 2, 3, 4, etc. If I have it the other way around, depending on the project, I may have more audio tracks, more instruments, and if that's growing on the left, then that means my buses will keep moving in numbers higher and higher. So because my buses, I know I leave them the same all the time, I thought it was best to put them on the left. They're consistent. The audio instrument tracks, as they grow, well, they just keep growing and growing and growing and just going up in number, and they're not pushing my buses out of the way. So that's why I've swapped it around this way. Everybody does this sort of stuff differently, but this is my process. So I'm going to put, and I'll just pick in one. So I'll find console 1, I'll put it on, and that's what it looks like straight away, nothing there. So it's going to put it on in order. So if I was to jump over here and put one on here, then that would become number 2, because it doesn't have the auto. And you'll see that says manual there, or it'll say auto if you've got a DAW that supports auto. Now if it was auto, that number should be populated based on which track I just put that on, and this should be populated by the name of the track. Now, as I said, with Pro Tools that doesn't work. So if I wanted to change the track number, I can click on that, and then what it says to do is to press the number on my actual console, the physical. So if I pressed the button 2, it would change it to track 2. Now I obviously want that to be track 1. Now if I want to set a name, I have to click on it, and then I have to type the name. So in this case, mix bus. Now because it's a bus, the other thing to keep in mind, this is a plugin, so it doesn't directly relate to the settings that are on here. So even though you'll see I've got this in solo safe on the DAW itself, that only works if I press solo on one of these. If I was to press the solo button on the console 1, this button has no effect on it, and it will basically mute this track if I solo one of these. So with your buses, you also need to solo safe in the plugin. Now, just while I'm in here, just as another thing, if you decide that you want to run portable as well, and you take your laptop somewhere, you've got your console 1 stuff on, but you don't take your console, it is actually possible to click on here and make adjustments with these knobs. Now, as you can see, it's damn tiny. So I'm hoping that in the future Softube will make this a bit bigger, because to me it's very hard to use. Yes, you can make adjustments, but you can hardly see it. And there's no numbers. If I was to turn something, there's no indication of what you've done. But it's there anyway as a backup if you need to change something and you don't have your console actually plugged in. So you can use the plugins without the console if you need to. Okay, so once I've done that, and I've solo saved that track, I need to do it on the other tracks. Now, with Pro Tools, there's a couple of ways to do this. Now, obviously I can keep going across and manually adding them on. I could also, I like to do is usually press the Alt Option button and drag across. The only issue with that in Pro Tools at the moment is if I do that, and I'll show you, what it's done is it's moved 1 across to here, and it's made that 2. So, and every time I do that option drag, it keeps moving that number across to there and moving that there, which is a bit of a pain. The other way to do it is to select multiple tracks and then put them on with the shift option, and that will then populate them all and keep them in order. But as you will have noticed, so we've got 3, sorry I didn't change that back to 1, that was my fault. So it doesn't do it in consecutive orders. But as you'll notice over here, because I started on a stereo track, it skipped the mono tracks, it can't add them. So again, we've jumped numbers. So if I then go and put a mono one on, it's going to have a different number. So we have to fix the numbers up if that was the case. Now, let me just take those off. Now, if I was to do it on the mono track, and that was my first one, and I pick mono, it will populate on the stereos. Just wait for it to finish. But what you'll find, what it's done, is it hasn't done it as a true stereo, it's done it as a multi-mono. So again, it's not really ideal. Not any, whether it's any different really, I don't personally like it. So let me fix this track back up. So I'm going to change that to 1 again. So we got 1. So what I'll do for this instance is we'll just do these first stereo ones, and I'll add the console one. Okay, so we see we've got track 2 again. Because we don't have auto mode, we have to type all the names in, and these are buses, so I'm going to solo safe, and we have to keep doing that all the way through our project. Just while I'm doing this, this is another bug that I had emailed to Softube as well, and they're aware of, which is a little bit annoying to me anyway. It slows the workflow down. If I click on this name, the text box comes up. Now, my first reaction was, as soon as I plug this in, I'll start typing. But I start typing, it's actually affecting the DAW, it's not affecting the thing. So, even though I've clicked on there, I then have to click a second time in the text box to type, which is inefficient because I'm having to double click every time I want to type a name. Now this is one reason that I suggest that once you establish your workflow, that you create a template so that you can at least have all of these buses. If you have these on every single song, then you can have these already set up with these labeled and everything pre-populated. So I'll just show you. So I'll go into, I press the display on button on my console, and that shows you the display. And you'll see this is where the track numbers and the naming comes in. So that from this console here, I can see which track I am adjusting. So I'm just pressing the buttons now, going through 1, 10, 11, 12, just hitting the physical buttons each one, and that's scrolling through. Now I've also got page up and page down buttons, so if I was to go page up, you'll see now we've got to 21 to 40, because there's only 20 buttons on the actual console for the tracks, so you can select 20 and then you've got 21 to 40, and you can keep going. It's I'm not sure if there's actually a limit, but it could be endless. But if you've got that many tracks, you're going to be very busy. So I can turn that display off now. That was just to show that. So with the mono, so another couple of things to be aware of. Now if I add on a mono track, I generally like to have my mono tracks mono. Right, if I've got a kick, I like it to be mono. Some people have every track as stereo, but I like mono. Now if I put console 1 on this track, so we will call this mono delay. I'm going to solo safe it. So one thing in the manual, now if I go to that track, track 15, if I have the track in mono, you'll see I'm turning the pan knob at the moment, which is changing the setting but it's actually not, it's grayed out. The pan knob does not work on mono tracks. And that's stated in the manual. It's a limitation or a feature, whatever you want to call it. To have that actually work, what Softube say is that you need to either convert your tracks to stereo, or you need to install it as a mono/stereo. So if I put that on, it converts the track to stereo in a way, visually anyway. And now if I open the window, the pan is not grayed out now, so that will actually now function. I still have not made up my mind what I'm going to do with that. A couple of songs that I have mixed so far, I have ignored the pan on the console, and I have left them as mono, and I've done all my panning within the DAW itself and not through the plugin. Okay, so I've just populated all the Console ones plugins on here. So you'll see, you look across here, I've got names in everyone, got tracks in them. We can go up, and so I've got names on each of these, and we go up to 42 tracks. Okay, so we'll do some examples now. So a couple of things that I've done here just to show you. Now, Softube advised that you put console plugin on every track, and which I have mostly done. Where I haven't is, for instance, with this one here, I've got 2 bass tracks, and I've bussed them through an auxiliary called bass. Now, the reason I've done that is because I'm blending these two together to make one instrument. So I could put console 1 on each one of these and then have the ability to compress, EQ each one of these. But in this instance and these acoustics, I'm going to treat them as one instrument, and all I've done is balance their levels prior. So I can actually hide those to make it easier, and then I won't even see them. So that's the reason I've done that. It cuts down the amount of times I put this on, because I would probably have the settings the same anyway. I want to modify these as one instrument. Okay, so what I wanted to show about the panning, so what I'm going to do now, the other thing to keep in mind is that these buttons and the buttons in the console 1 are independent. So I can solo the overheads from here. Now, sorry, I had that solo saved for some reason. And oh, you can turn that up. Okay, so that's soloed from there. Take it off, get more tracks. And then I can actually solo it in here with the solo button, and you'll see that's gone solo. That all says solo safe. And that's where that solo save comes in. It's independent to the solo save that's on here. So I could have these not solo saved. And if I do my solo in console 1, it will still be solo saved. If that makes sense. It's not very clear, but okay, anyway. So let's have a look at the overheads. So with the overheads, got them soloed. Now in Pro Tools, because I've got 2, it's in stereo, I can adjust these independently and reduce how wide it is in the stereo field. I can narrow it down, you know, and I'll quite often do this with tracks where I may say I don't want them wide out, I just want them halfway. Or you can push it all the way out. Now, the reason I haven't been using the pan at the moment is because I've got on a stereo track. If I use the pan on the console 1, this is what happens. I cannot adjust the stereo width. What I'm adjusting is the pan left and right. Which is fine for a mono track, but if you've got a stereo track and you're like me and you like to adjust the width of it, you can't currently do that with the pan knob on the console 1, and I'm not sure whether you ever will be able to. It could be a limitation. So they're the reasons I haven't been using the pan knob. Okay, we'll stop that. Now the other thing to keep in mind as well is the volume knob on the console 1. Now, a lot of people say, oh, I should have had a fader on it, etc. Regardless of whether it's fader or knob. Doesn't really bother me too much. But the thing that you need to be aware of is that it is adjusting the plugin. It is not adjusting this setting here. Okay, so, and where this comes into concern, so just the way I've got it now, if I play this, I can use this fader to adjust the level, no problem. I can go into console 1 and use the volume knob on the console 1. And that works exactly the same. Right, we can go louder. We've also got an input gain, so if I say that's a bit low, I can push that up to get it to a nice level. Okay, but if I use, and this is where the trick, so if I use the volume on here to adjust my level, so I'll leave it at the current level. Where it comes into a problem is if you like to stack or place, let's say you want to stack compressors or you want to place a plugin after that plugin. So for instance, we'll just put another compressor on. I'll just leave that open for the moment. So now if I play that track, you'll see that level there. That's what's going into this plugin. Now if I reduce the volume on here, what I've done, not only have I reduced the volume that this is playing, but I've reduced the volume of the track going into this plugin. So as I turn it down, you'll see it going lower and lower and lower. So if you like to stack compressors, the volume knob on the console 1 is affecting the gain staging going into the next plugin. And then if I turn it back up, and same if I turn it up louder, I'm affecting the gain staging into the next plugin. So let's just put that back to 0. Whereas there, if you watch that, if I do the fader on this, I'm not affecting what goes into this plugin. I'm only affecting the end result of the track. So that's something to keep in mind. And that's the way, pause that. that's the way I've been using the volume knob on the console one. I haven't been using the volume knob on the console one to set my track levels. I've been using it as a gain staging tool for the plugin. So for instance, if I do a lot of EQs and compression within the plugin and I'm doing a lot of boosts and suddenly my levels are jumping, or I'm doing cuts and my levels are dropping, I'll use the volume knob to adjust that to get it back to the level so that if I was to bypass, I'm at the same level as if I activate. Same as I would use makeup gain on a compressor plugin. That's what I use the volume knob on the console one at the moment. If you really want to use it as a volume knob, the only other way I can suggest that you do it, but to me this is more complicated, would be that you install a second instance of the plugin, which you can do. You can put as many instances on here as you want. The best way to think of the console one, even though you're not routing out to the console one is just the hardware controller, it's the plugin. But if you think of the plugin as an external box, that's the way it functions, as if you were routing out to an external mixer and then routing back in. So whatever knobs you touch on the console one is affecting what comes back in at the same spot, so coming into the next plugin. So all the plugins you put after, so if you want to have, you can put plugins after the console one, you can put plugins before the console one. You just need to imagine that's an external box that you're routing out of. So if you want to do a de-esser before the console one, you put a de-esser there, set your levels, set it right. It then routes to the console one, you do your changes on your console one, then that comes out and then routes to your next plugin. So if you were to put two instances of console one on here, for instance, you could have this one here, which you're using, you're doing your EQ, compression, etc. And then this other one here, you could give it a name and just call it volume, whatever you want, for, or overhead volume. Okay. So then if I went in here, I'd probably set the different number if I was going to do it, but I'd select 43, and then that could be my track level volume. I could also use the same function by, say, getting rid of that, and I could use it to do stack compression if I want to do almost everything or as much as I can within the console one and with my knobs on the console one. I could give this another name, and then with that track I could just do a compressor. And what I could do is, let's say for instance I've got other options with Softube, which you saw I did. So in the Softube here, I can actually change the compressor with, so I could set it to the FET compressor. Now this only works with Softube compressors and EQs. Alright, it won't work with other vendors. So I could select the FET. You'll see that it's changed their FET. It changes the settings. Now there are limitations, which I can show you as well. So, but I could do that, and I could have this. So this is my compressor track. I could do my adjustments, and then I can go back down to my original console one overheads before it, which has the standard SSL compressor on it. I have compression on there as well. So I've got stack compressors, which I'm driving now from the console one. So while we're at it, I will show you what I mean by the limitations. So for instance, I have the ability to change the EQ on this. So if I want to change the EQ, and let's say I want to do the Summit Audio EQF 100, and I select that. There's limitations in the fact that you've only got certain knobs. They can't redesign the entire board for every plugin. Now, I'm hoping that some of these things will be fine-tuned, or they'll work out a way to do some certain things differently. So where you've got a button, for instance, on this, with the SSL, you've normally got, so the first button, which reacts here, is labelled cut, bell and shelf. In this instance, with this EQ, it's now out, cut and boost. So obviously, you know, boost, and then out does nothing, and cut is the opposite way. With the mid, and that's the same with the high as well. So with the high cut, high boost cut, sorry. With the mids, you've got your bandwidth, you've got your frequencies, and you'll notice if you, I'll show you the plugin in a minute, but with the Summit Audio EQF, the frequencies are set. There's certain ranges, it's not fluid, so you'll see it's flicking between certain ones, and you've got a mid gain. Okay, so they're the entire settings that you can do when you select that EQ. Now if I was to actually put the physical EQ on, I have a few more settings that I don't have. Now, so as you would notice here, with the low mid and the high mid, I can only boost. I can't cut. There's no way to cut. Whereas in the plugin, I've got plus, out, and cut. So I can cut. So I'm hoping that some of these things will be addressed. You know, I would have thought that Softube would just have this knob, instead of a switch, have this knob that it could go up and down into a negative number, similar to what you can do with the SSL version. You know, you can go positive or negative, so hopefully that thing will be addressed, but you just need to be aware there are some limitations. Same with even with the compressors, you know, they're the settings for the compressors. The compressor. Now if I was to put that compressor on here, there's some settings that aren't there. You know, this whole section of detector is not here. You know, you can't do that setting.